next one is like people like Richard Dawkins. They say that the God of the Old Testament is so cruel, and they call God all kinds of names.
Yeah.
And why does God in the Old Testament appear so cruel?
Well, okay, so there's a couple ways to approach. I think this is a very, very robust. I've seen different arguments for this and different explanations. I am always struck by the fact that, um, I hear a lot of skeptics will say, "Well, why doesn't God act to stop evil? God doesn't exist because if God existed, He would act to stop evil, and I don't see Him acting to stop evil." Well, it turns out we have a decent historical record from the past in which God did to stop evil. He acted to stop evil. And he acted to stop evil with people groups who were actually executing their own children, sacrificing their own children to unknown gods or to gods of their own culture. And they were warned for hundreds of years to stop doing this and didn't stop. And then God acts to stop evil. Yet now, of course, when he does that, we're going to complain that he acts to stop evil. Part of the problem is that God does act to stop evil. And we have to remember that when God acts, we see everything in terms of our 90 years on planet Earth. So whatever God does to me or doesn't do for me in those 90 years, I'm going to shake my fist at God, or I'm going to say, hey, thanks, God. But the reality of it is that we are created beings who will live in eternity with God. We are not 90-year creatures. We are an infinite year creatures. We are eternal. And so whatever happens, whatever God does to us, it cannot be measured in those 90 years. So if, for example, he takes me tomorrow, it does not mean that there's no God because I died of a heart attack tomorrow. I'm still alive. I'm still with God in eternity where there's no pain and no suffering. God takes some people off the planet, but it does not mean he has killed them in the sense that they are no longer existing. Under our worldview, we are existing beyond the grave, and we have no idea what God does beyond the grave in terms of how many people will he take off the planet that he just takes home to himself? How many people does he take off the planet to eternal punishment? That's two different issues, and we don't know those two groups. So when I see that large people groups are somehow destroyed and people blame God for this, I don't know how many of those people just go home with God immediately because they weren't seen by God as somebody worthy of punishment, or how many were. But it seems to me, give me an example of this. If I'm in an art class and you're in an art class with me and we're both painting a painting of an apple, okay, on a little podium, and I look at my painting at some point and I say, man, this stinks, and I tear up my painting, and you're like, wow, he's pretty. Then I look over at your painting and I say, your painting's lousy also, and I tear up your painting. Well, you didn't mind when I was tearing up my painting, but now you're upset that I'm tearing up yours. Because it seems to you understand that the artist has the right to destroy his own art, but doesn't really have the right to destroy your art. Well, the artist here is God, and we are all his creation, his artwork. And it seems to me that if anyone has a right to destroy its own artwork, it's the artist. We recognize that in our own lives, and we recognize that as a spiritual concept. So I think there are times when God judges people groups. And you might say, well, what about the young, the babies? We don't know that God, look, again, remember that God, we are eternal creatures. And you may get to meet many people from that people group you thought were utterly destroyed. You might get to meet them at some point in eternity because God is not necessarily destroyed. Now, also keep in mind, though, at the same time, another truth is also true, which is that there are descriptions in Scripture in which people groups are commanded to be utterly destroyed, and then you find them later in in a different book in Scripture where the people group is still in existence. Well, wait a minute, I thought they were utterly destroyed. There is some sense in which language in the Old Testament is, it might say, to utterly destroy something really means to render them as no longer a threat to you. So you might like say, one team that completely killed another team last night at a sporting event. It doesn't mean they actually killed them. It means they beat them in the game. Well, there is some language in the ancient Near Eastern literature in which these expressions used by the biblical writers do not necessarily mean that entire people groups are destroyed, but instead mean that they were no longer a threat, because you'll see the same members of that group will appear in the same history of the Jews later on. So apparently they weren't all destroyed. But again, I think we have to allow for God, as God, to be the artist that has control over his artistic creation. And when he acts to stop evil, Well, if we're going to complain when he doesn't act, we can't complain when he does.